Rain used to end trips, ruin gear, and soak people to the bone. Then, quietly, in the 1980s, a strange little fabric trick spread through workshops, garages, and outdoor circles, and it worked far better than anyone expected. This wasn't a factory breakthrough or a flashy new product launch. It was a hands-on workaround. Cheap, practical, almost too simple. And for a brief moment it made everyday cloth behave like modern waterproof gear. Today, most people have never heard of it. But this forgotten method sits right at the crossroads of old survival thinking and early modern chemistry. And once you understand how it worked, you'll see why it mattered, and honestly, why it still does. Back in the early 1980s, waterproof clothing was, well, kind of a luxury. Sure, waterproof gear existed, but it wasn't really everywhere like it is today. High-end jackets relied on special coatings or laminated membranes that were honestly pretty expensive, stiff, and, often kind of fragile. If that coating ever cracked or peeled, well, that jacket was done for, and most folks just couldn't go out and replace it. Outdoor workers, hunters, fishermen and campers, these folks really needed something different. They needed cloth that could actually survive the rain, without trapping sweat or just falling apart after one season. Wax canvas had been around for centuries, but let's face it, it was heavy, got stiff in cold weather, and needed a whole lot of upkeep. So people started experimenting. Not in fancy labs, but, in their own garages. Here's the core idea, and this is where it gets clever. Silicone rubber, the same flexible material used to seal windows and waterproof bathrooms, has one powerful property. Once cured, water simply cannot pass through it. But straight out of the tube, silicone is thick and useless for fabric. The trick was thinning it. In the 1980s, outdoorsmen and DIY tinkerers discovered that silicone sealant could be diluted with mineral spirits until it became a thin, milky liquid. That liquid could be brushed or sprayed onto fabric. Once it dried, the solvent evaporated, leaving behind a microscopic layer of flexible silicone bonded to the fibres. Not a film, not a crust, a coating that moved with the cloth. And suddenly, cotton jackets, canvas tarps, and even denim could shed rain. So, why did this work so well? Well, you see, this wasn't magic. It was really just chemistry meeting common sense. Fabric isn't actually solid. It's more like a web of fibres with all these tiny gaps between them. Water moves through those gaps by something called capillary action. The silicone solution, it flowed right into those spaces, coating each thread individually instead of, clogging up the whole weave. And when it cured, it didn't block airflow completely. Nope, it just made the fibres themselves water-repellent. That meant rain would bead up and roll right off, while the fabric stayed nice and flexible. No cracking, no peeling, and none of that waxy stiffness you might expect. Now, here's the interesting part. This approach actually mimicked what modern durable water-repellent finishes are trying to do today, but using materials you could pick up at any hardware store. Folks really did use this stuff in their daily lives. This wasn't just some far-off theory. People, well, they actually trusted their lives to it. Campers, for example, treated their tent floors to keep groundwater from seeping in. Hunters would coat their canvas jackets so they could sit in wet brush for, hours on end. Sailors treated covers and bags to keep all their gear dry up on deck. And farmers, well, they'd waterproof their work clothes instead of buying new ones every single season. The process itself was simple, but it sure did require some patience. First, the fabric had to be clean and just completely dry. Then the silicone mixture was applied evenly, often with a paintbrush, or maybe even a garden sprayer. After that, it was just a matter of waiting. Full curing could take a day or more, depending on the humidity. Once cured, the fabric looked almost unchanged. There was no shine and no heavy smell, just water, rolling off like it hit glass. The limits nobody talked about. This hack wasn't perfect, and honestly, that's part of why it faded. Silicone-treated fabric wasn't breathable in the modern sense. Sweat vapour could escape slowly, but not quickly. For active movement, it could feel, pretty clammy, and reapplication was necessary after heavy wear or repeated washing. There was also, no factory consistency. One bad mix ratio could leave fabric sticky or uneven. This was skill-based knowledge. You learned by doing, and honestly, mistakes were just part of the process. But for people who needed reliable rain protection with limited resources, it was, worth it. By the 1990s, outdoor gear changed fast. Commercial, waterproof, breathable fabrics became lighter and more affordable. Spray-on water repellents flooded the market. Consumers wanted convenience, not experiments that smelled like a workshop. The silicone hack quietly slipped into obscurity. It survived in niche communities, but the broader world forgot it ever existed. And that's a familiar story in survival history. When technology becomes convenient, practical knowledge often gets left behind. This old method wasn't about comfort or fashion. It was about control. It gave people the ability to modify what they already owned, to adapt tools instead of replacing them, to solve problems with materials on hand. In survival thinking, that mindset is everything. If, modern coatings fail, peel, or just wear out, knowing how to waterproof fabric from scratch is, really powerful knowledge. Especially in long-term outdoor living, disaster scenarios, or off-grid conditions where replacements just aren't an option. This hack, it reminds us that resilience often lives in those forgotten corners of history. Would this replace a modern rain jacket today? No, it really wouldn't. But could it turn a canvas pack, tarp, work jacket or shelter cloth into reliable rain protection? Absolutely, if it's done carefully. And, more importantly, it teaches a principle. Waterproofing doesn't require high-tech factories. It requires understanding materials, behaviour and function. That's the real legacy here. The bigger lesson behind the hack, it goes beyond just the trick itself. The 1980s silicone fabric trick wasn't just about staying dry. It was really about independence. It came from folks who simply couldn't afford failure. People who honestly trusted their own hands more than any marketing promises. And they understood that knowledge, once it's lost, is pretty tough to replace. This is exactly the kind of thinking that built human survival long before convenience took over. And, you know, it's why stories like this truly matter. If you found this forgotten technique fascinating, stay with us. Subscribe to Legacy of Survival for more lost skills, real-world knowledge, and the quiet genius hidden in history. Like the video if it taught you something new, share it with someone who loves practical wisdom, and keep exploring the past with us. There's a lot more still waiting to be rediscovered.